Some might be sceptical, but others claim a sprinkling of fairy dust is the perfect remedy for a happy life. And two women who claim to embody these mythical creatures are India Terry, who first communicated with fairies in childhood, and Avi Esther, who claims to be able to perform healing miracles thanks to her enchanted friends.
Well, the pair join us now, which is why we're sitting on toadstools.
Good morning.
We're all away with the fairies today. So Avi, let's start with you first of all, because our thoughts of fairies would be, you know, sort of folklore, children's stories, Disney, you know, that sort of thing. So for you, what is a fairy? What does it look like?
Well, that's kind of two questions. So to me, a fairy is a multidimensional being, right? So if you think about our electromagnetic spectrum, what we can see within that, the visible light spectrum within that is quite small. So it's understandable to think that maybe there are other sentient beings that exist maybe beyond our visibility. So to me, a fairy or other fae creatures are beings that can be invisible to us, but that exist in a parallel dimension, if you will.
So do you see them?
I do see them sometimes.
What do they
usually
look like?
As a light. So I'll see like almost like a light figure, like a shadow, but with light. And sometimes they're really small, and sometimes they're really big. Sometimes they're super big. And, you know, just like we all look different, they all look different. It depends on where I am in the world. It depends.
Are there any in here?
I mean, I could tune in, but we're quite far away from nature, and I could ask. There's definitely some energy in here, some sentient, but we all have spirit guides and other beings, so...
You were quite young, I mean, you were 3 when you saw your first fairy, so did you really understand what was going on at that time?
I don't know that I understood that it was a fairy as Disney or Tolkien or, you know, the novelists and the mythologies that we understand, or as I understand as an adult are, but they were just my friends that I played with in the garden.
But they did communicate with you because they taught you how to bring a bird back to life.
Yeah.
But how did you do that?
Well, the how is always a difficult question, right? So how do we do anything? And we can break it down and find the scientific reasoning for all of it, or we can just understand that there was a moment where something shifted and there was a dead bird, and my fairy friends just kind of guided me to wish it back to life.
Well, I brought a goldfish back to life with a cappuccino whisk.
with a cappuccino whisk.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember having any communication there, but I mean, you never
Something
know.
told you how to do it.
Something told me how to do it, yeah.
You just knew.
There was no oxygen in the water, and I whisked up the water, and suddenly it was oxygenated, and the fish came back to life again.
Actually...
But you rubbed it, though, didn't you?
So I stroked it. So
like CPR?
Well, I have actually done CPR on a bird when I was 13 because I was a veterinarian assistant, and it was not that.
Right.
It felt more magical, more kind of...
So, like, it was just... And you have to remember, I was tiny, so my hand was only tiny, and it sat in my hand, and I kind of just stroked it and followed it with my finger more than pushed it or prodded it or anything. And, I mean, you could say that maybe it just had shock and it woke up, but it was out for a while.
So, India, for you, I mean, like most little girls, like you loved fairies when you were younger, and then as you got older and your friends sort of decided they weren't into fairies anymore, you still were, and you tried to step away from it, but that pull was still very much there. You know a way to communicate with fairies by giving them gifts.
Well, fairies are naturally tricksters, and they won't just, you know, like you might bump into a person or a human and just start a conversation with them. Sometimes they like to play a bit more before you meet them, and you have to be open to meeting them. And one of the ways that you can sort of earn their trust, but only if you are pure of intention. You're not doing it because you want to capture a fairy or want to... But if you do have that pure intention, you can leave them little gifts. So.
Like what? What would you leave them?
So they like food, they like objects of intrigue. So it was only yesterday I went to a waterfall and left them a little a crystal.
And did they appear?
Yeah, well, they appeared in light, like Avi was saying, and in energy. You can feel them when they're around, and you don't always have to see them as like a physical thing to know.
But it's a bit scary because you said you put honey by a tree. For me, that would just bring wasps. but also you put honey by a tree and it brought a fairy that was 2 foot tall.
Yeah, it was
that would scare the life out of me.
Well, it was it was, again, this time when I'd kind of rediscovered fairies at about 14.
Yeah.
And I knew that they were there and I could feel them around, but I hadn't seen them since I was a child, and I really, really wanted to. So I did a lot of, you know, talking, which some people might think is crazy, you know, talking out loud when you can't necessarily see something there, and leaving gifts and reading. And yeah, I left gifts by this tree for a few days, and a big fairy just flew past.
Wow, and you could see that?
Yeah, that was actually visual.
And you've seen many. I mean, the procession through the woods that you saw, I mean, that's incredible. Like, when you see that happening, is it the type of thing where you could get your phone and capture it?
You could. Sometimes you couldn't, because what you see on a phone might not look like anything special. But when you see something and it has that energy behind, so when you see fairies and they obviously have the fairy energy behind, it feels a lot more than sometimes what you could capture. So like the procession of the fire fairies at summer solstice, if you took a photo, you'd see a fire. But if you were looking there, because it's deeper within, what the human eye can see is so much more than what a camera can see.
Are they happy with the communication? What do they want, or are they just happy to exist on their own? But you know, they just, as they drift in and out of these different parts of our universe, and you see them, they're okay with that?
Yeah. In fact, I think some of them quite like that we can see them, because, I mean, it's like you're going about your everyday life, doing your everyday thing, and then you get to go and speak to a fairy. Well, it's kind of the other way around for them. They're going about their everyday life, doing their everyday thing, and then a human sees them, and it's like, whoa, you can see me? Amazing. And then sometimes they can be quite trickstery, and that's why gifts are very important. You want to stay on their good side.
But what happens if you get on the wrong side?
Oh, man, the keys that you put on the table won't be there.
Can they be malicious?
Some fairies.
Yeah.
Some fairies, yeah.
And if you go into various lore, some fairies are downright evil, but I don't talk to or have anything to do with those fairies.
Only the good fairies.
Only the good fairies, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
I love this. Can I just come and hang out in a wood with you, please?
Yeah,
and I want to
you're
wear
welcome
one of those and have some wings. I've almost got them. Now I know why I wore this. They're my wings.
Sometimes I find, because I live in the New Forest, and sometimes I'll feel the energy of a fairy or like the Green Man or a sentience like that, and then an animal will appear, and they won't just sort of run away, or like people will be like, oh, the horses are just looking for food, and they aren't always. Some of them are, and I know who they are, and you can tell when a horse is like checking your pockets for food. But sometimes they just want to interact with you.
I was walking when I was young with my folks in Cornwall out on a headland, and they'd all seen rabbits, and I hadn't seen one. And we walked down this path, and they said, look, there's a fairy ring of toadstools.
Yeah.
And I stood in the middle of this fairy ring of toadstools, and I said, I want to see a rabbit. And at that second, the rabbit ran straight across and in front of me.
You see?
See, that was probably a fairy, just in its shapeshift as a rabbit.
Really? Yeah.
Well,
there you go.
There's an indigenous culture in Canada who believe that the spirit of the Amanita muscaria, or the fly agaric, actually is a fairy spirit, and that it can shapeshift between like a person
maybe that's what
and
you
a
thought.
toadstool.
Fly agaric, by the way, is the famous red toadstool guy. I know about toadstools as well.
Thank you both.
Red and white
Thank you.
toadstool.
It was lovely. Thank you.